Chapter 1: The Silent World Before Steam. The modern world wasn't built with words, it was built with iron, coal, and steam. To understand the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, we must first look at the world it replaced. Before the late 1700s, life moved at the speed of a horse and the strength of a human arm. Most people lived and died within 10 miles of where they were born. Their lives were dictated by the seasons, the sun, and the harvest. But beneath the surface of Great Britain, a silent energy was waiting to be unleashed. Chapter 2: Why Britain? The Perfect Storm. Our story begins in Great Britain during the 1760s. Why did this island nation, and not China or France, spark the flame? Britain had a unique perfect storm of conditions. First, geography. Britain sat on a literal mountain of coal and iron ore, the two fuels of industry. Second, they had a stable government that protected private property and patents. Third, their geography as an island meant they were safe from the Napoleonic Wars ravaging mainland Europe. While other nations were fighting for survival, British inventors were dreaming. In 1764, James Hargreaves invented the spinning jenny. Imagine a single person being able to do the work of 8. This wasn't just a tool, it was the end of the cottage industry. People who used to work at home were now being pulled into the first primitive factories. Chapter 3: The Engine That Changed Everything. Then came 1776. While the American colonies were fighting for liberty, a Scottish engineer named James Watt was perfecting the machine that would provide the power for that liberty, the steam engine. Before Watt, factories had to be built next to rushing rivers to use water wheels. This limited where industry could exist. But the steam engine could be placed anywhere. It could be put in a city, in a basement, or eventually, on wheels. By the early 1800s, Britain was no longer an agricultural nation, it was the workshop of the world. Cities like Manchester grew by 500% in a single generation. This was the birth of the industrial city, a place of massive wealth, but also of thick black soot, overcrowded tenements, and the rhythmic clanging of hammers that never stopped, day or night. Chapter 4: With the Spread and the Second Wave. Britain tried to guard its technology like a state secret. It was actually illegal for textile workers or engineers to emigrate. But secrets of that scale cannot be kept. By the 1830s, Belgium became the first to follow, using its own coal reserves to mirror the British model. France followed, though more cautiously, maintaining its luxury crafts alongside new factories. Then came the Second Industrial Revolution in the mid-19th century. This was the era of steel, chemicals, and electricity. After 1871, a newly unified Germany emerged as a terrifying industrial competitor. The Germans didn't just build factories, they built research laboratories. They realized that science was the key to the next phase of power. By the 1890s, German steel was outproducing British steel, and German chemical companies were dominating the global market. Across the ocean, the United States was undergoing a transformation that was even more explosive. With a vast continent of untapped resources and millions of immigrants providing a hungry workforce, the US began building the longest railroad networks in history. This competition was no longer just about who could make the best cloth, it was about who could command the most resources and the fastest transportation. Chapter 5: The Dark Side, Labor and Society. We cannot talk about the competition of nations without talking about the people who built them. The Industrial Revolution created a massive new to middle class of factory owners, lawyers, and managers. But it also created a working class that lived in conditions we would find unthinkable today. In the 1840s, it was common for children as young as 6 to work in coal mines or crawl under moving machinery in textile mills. This created a new kind of internal competition. As nations raced against each other, their own citizens began to demand rights. This era saw the birth of labor unions and new political ideologies like socialism and communism. Governments realized that to be a strong industrial power, they needed a healthy, educated workforce, leading to the first public schools and labor laws. The competition was forcing civilizations to evolve socially as well as technologically. Chapter 6: The Hunger for Empire. As the 19th century progressed, the factories of Europe and America developed an insatiable hunger. They needed raw materials that their own land could not provide: rubber from the Congo for tires, cotton from Egypt for textiles, and palm oil from West Africa for machine lubricants. This turned economic competition into the new imperialism. Britain, being the first to industrialize, had a massive head start. They occupied India, turning an entire civilization into a resource farm. India provided the cotton, and in return, India was forced to buy the finished British clothing. This captive market system made Britain the wealthiest empire in human history. By the late 1800s, it was said that the sun never sets on the British Empire. Chapter 7: The Scramble for Africa. Seeing Britain's wealth, other nations grew desperate. In 1884, the leaders of Europe met at the Berlin Conference. On a large map of Africa, they drew lines that ignored ethnic boundaries, languages, and history. They divided the continent among themselves to ensure they each had their own source of raw materials. Belgium took the Congo, France took vast stretches of West Africa, and Germany, arriving late to the game, seized territories in the east and southwest. This wasn't just about money, it was about prestige. If you didn't have colonies, you weren't considered a great power. The competition was now a global game of chess, and the pieces were entire nations. Chapter 8: The Arms Race and the Road to War. By 1900, the Industrial Revolution had reached its most dangerous phase, the militarization of industry. The same factories that made tractors could now make tanks. The same chemical plants that made fertilizer could make explosives. Britain and Germany entered a naval arms race. Britain had always ruled the waves, but Germany began building dreadnoughts, massive, steel-clad battleships. Every time Britain built one, Germany built two. This was industrial competition at its most lethal. The European powers were no longer just rivals, they were becoming enemies, locked in a system of secret alliances designed to protect their industrial and colonial interests. Chapter 9: The Tipping Point. The world was now a giant, interconnected machine. A factory in Manchester depended on cotton from India, a bank in Berlin depended on mines in Africa. But this connectivity made the world fragile. The competition for colonies and the race for industrial dominance had created a tinderbox. The great civilizations of Europe were armed to the teeth, their factories running 24/7 to produce weapons of mass destruction, all while their leaders looked for any excuse to prove their national superiority. The Industrial Revolution had given humanity the power to create a utopia, but by 1914, that power was being funneled into a machine of war. The competition between nations had moved from the factory floor to the battlefield. Conclusion: the next chapter. The gears were turning, the steam was rising, and the soldiers were marching. The era of progress was about to meet the era of total destruction. In the next episode, we will talk about the reasons and circumstances behind how World War I started. We will explore the powder keg of the Balkans, the web of alliances, and the single gunshot in Sarajevo that brought the industrial world to its knees. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the start of the Great War.